Okay, this is screencast one on the text of William Wordsworth. I am going to tackle I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud and then Lines Composed a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey in this screencast. Tintern is obviously one of the longer poems of his, but we'll start with I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud first and we'll read and then we'll kind of talk about it a little bit. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. Continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way, they stretched in a never-ending line along the margin of a bay. 10,000 saw I at a glance, tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. A poet could not be but be gay in such a jocund company. I gazed and gazed, but little thought what wealth the show to me had brought. For oft, when on my couch I lie in vacant or in pensive mood, they flash upon that inward eye which is the bliss of solitude, and then my heart with pleasure fills and dances with the daffodils. So I wondered lonely as a cloud, which is also known as Daffodils, is kind of a quintessential romantic poem and is probably Wordsworth's most beloved works. The origin story goes that in 1802, in April, in the springtime, Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy, who he was extremely close to, and we're going to see her pop back up in Tintern Abbey here very shortly, they were walking in nature in the Lake District, which is where Wordsworth spent the final years of his life. It's known for its beauty, mountains and hills, and bodies of water, lakes, that kind of thing. Obviously, the Lake District. So he was walking with his sister, and they came across a host of daffodils around Glencoyne Bay in the Lake District, and so it served as the inspiration for the composition of this lyric poem. So we have four stanzas of 6 lines each. Each stanza adheres to the quatrain couplet rhyme scheme. So that's A, B, and then a couplet at the end, C, C. So each stanza follows that same pattern. It's written from the first person point of view, which makes it an ideal example of a lyric poem. All right, let's take a look at I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud. So I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, um, there, his speaker, which we know to be Wordsworth himself for this particular poem, is just occasionally going on these little aimless wanders. He refers to himself as a cloud metaphorically, even though clouds tend to travel in groups. This cloud prefers to hover singularly over this scene. However, he's passing through valleys and hills on this walk as in a cloud-like state. Um, he comes across a bunch of daffodils that are fluttering in the air, and he's really kind of spellbound by the beauty of those daffodils. You know, normally daffodils are yellow. That's the color that's given to describe them. It's interesting that he chooses golden here, golden, gold to signify that, the staying power of gold, even though yellow would be more suitable. um, so they're termed as a host or a crowd there because they're a collective bunch there together. They're on beside the lake beneath some trees, and it's windy outside, and the flowers are dancing and kind of fluttering as the wind blows. Okay, and stanza two that starts with the continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. It's an allegory to our own native galaxy, the Milky Way, which holds, great mystery for our poet because he envisions the daffodils to be in a constant state of wonder, just as we wonder at the stars that are beyond the reach of humans. They are stretched out just as our stars, our galaxy, is stretched out beyond infinity. So we got this large area at the lake, and the daffodils are kind of dispersed along the shoreline. And he says there are 10,000 that he saw at a glance, which is surely kind of a wild estimation, a gross over exaggeration. But they are overpowering all the other elements around them, the lake, the trees, the land itself, and it's really just the daffodils that are taking up the space. And they are tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. So a sprite here is a tiny little spirit that's kind of akin to a little fairy. They're mischievous, and so these daffodils, they're with their personification of a sprite here. They're tossing their heads in a sprightly dance. The waves beside them danced, but they outdid the sparkling waves in glee. So they're caught up in this sprightly dance, and the lake beside them is sparkling in the sunlight, and the waves are doing their own dancing. But the dance of the daffodils, is kind of overpowering that image. And witnessing this scene, he becomes so gay or so happy or joyous that he was not able to move from this scene. And they were a jocund company, or lighthearted and cheerful company, which is a quality that he doesn't find too often and the humans that he is around. And they make him spellbound, which is why he's kind of rooted to that point there. We see gazed repeated twice. I gazed and gazed, right? He is rooted to that moment, so he just cannot step away from it. His eyes are, transfixed. He's transfixed by their golden beauty. And so he continues to stay there and drinking in the calm and their serenity, and they bring him so much wealth. This scene, it brings him so much wealth um, to to his mind and to his state of being. Okay. There in the last stanza, he's talking about he's after he has left this scene, in the years that pass, when he's laying on his couch and he's in a vacant or thoughtful mood, vacant or pensive, right? This scene, this image, flashes into his mind's eye. So whenever he is, unhappy or I won't say necessarily depressed, but vacant, not there. He's pensive, thoughtful. This image just supplies him with a source of energy and calm and happiness, and that memory that he associates with that moment in time with the daffodils fills his heart with pleasure, and it makes his heart leap up as if he too is dancing with the daffodil. It's a very telling poem on the power of nature, and its ability for us to seek comfort and and find solace and peace in the beauty of nature. Okay, let's tackle 10 Turn Abbey really quick. It's the longest one of the ones we read this week, um, but I like this poem. It's kind of about the staying power of nature in your mind, and we remember we talked about our possibly I talk about that in the I recorded the second screencast first. So I recorded the second screencast first, and then I did talk about about the staying power of nature and its restorative and healing powers. And so um, he is um, he is returning back to a place that he has been before, but he's not been there for quite some time. So he's on the banks of the River Wye, a few miles above Tintern Abbey. Tintern Abbey was a monastery that was dissolved during the um, the period of time that Henry VIII was in power. Henry VIII, if you remember, probably maybe for all of his wives, but his break with the Catholic Church, he created his own church because he wanted to be able to get a divorce. That's a story for another day. He commissioned to have the building destroyed. Um, so, and kind of to resolve his connection with the church. Um, uh, so anyway, this site is it was a popular site for poets, writers, artists at the time period to visit there on the banks of the River Wye. So it's been 5 years since he's been here, and it's been so long. It's in Wales, and these years have been excruciatingly long for him, like 5 long winters there, but he's finally come back to where he can hear again these waters rolling from down from their mountain springs, and it's like he is hearing them again, but for the first time, like whispering voices, perhaps that are enchanting the place. And so he's looking around him. He's seeing all the other things around him, the steep cliffs. And they're just not landmarks, but they are bringing certain emotions. The scene is bringing certain emotions to the surface. So he has like thoughts of deep seclusion, and it's peaceful. It's solitude, the land, the sky, everything in between. He's finding his place within that. So Wordsworth continues on to say that the day has finally come that he can repose or relax. Um, Under a dark sycamore tree that is growing and nearby, and kind of take in all the sights around it, the copses of trees and the groves, the orchards, um, the hedgerows, little lines of little hedges that run through the landscape. And even though it appears the same as it did 5 years ago, it's not exactly the same because everything nothing really ever truly remains the same. And so he imagines that in those last 4 lines, that vagrant dwellers or hermits or homeless people live out in the houseless woods, which is a state kind of like this that the speaker envies. Okay, and the second stanza that begins with these beauteous forms, they have not entirely left him over all this time. Even though he hasn't been there for a long time, they've been out of sight in his his regular eyesight. In his mind's eye, it's never really been forgotten to him. And sometimes when he has found himself in lonely rooms, in the middle of towns and cities and the noise and the hubbub and everything that's happening, he's been able to find this landscape or revisit it within his mind and find and seek comfort in it. Okay, and so he's going to go along and talk about this for quite a period of time, about how these memories have brought him so much peace and comfort. He depends on these memories when he's disturbed by the fever of the world. And he's talking about, this is his church, this is like worship for him, and has changed his life significantly over the course of his life. Um, Down in stanza 5. I think, and that's where I want to be, is 5. And I'm really kind of just skimming and skipping here. But stanza 5, the final stanza, he is addressing someone. He's not been alone in this poem. There's someone else with him, and it turns out that it's his sister Dorothy. And what he is hoping is that, as he's explaining what this is meant to him, that she will come to see this as the way that it is to him. He wants her to be able to find comfort and peace in nature, I got to stop and pick up with a short little section in an